Flights are $2.99 each. My mom told Grandpa, if you can't afford it, stay behind. He nodded quiet small like a man who'd spent a lifetime not making waves. I was standing behind the kitchen wall still holding the salad tongs. What he didn't know was that his credit card had just been charged for 4 business class tickets to Maui for my mom, my sister, her husband, and her best friend. Not for him, and definitely not for me. I didn't say anything at dinner. I just helped clear the table. But inside, something snapped, not in rhino and clarity, so I told them I'd stay behind too. They laughed, assumed I was being dramatic. But what they didn't know was that Grandpa and I weren't staying behind. We were stepping out of their shadow. And what I would find that weekend in the basement of his quiet house would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning of their flight, the house buzzed with excitement. My mom was barking orders about sunscreen and boarding passes. Becca was arguing over how many pairs of heels to bring. And Tyler, as usual, was doing nothing except sipping his green smoothie like he was royalty. Grandpa sat in the corner of the living room, quietly folding his favorite sweater and placing it into an old canvas duffel bag. He didn't have a roller suitcase, just that bag he'd had since the 70s. I noticed his hands trembling as he zipped it shut. "Are you sure you got a ticket, Grandpa?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He smiled without meeting my eyes. "Your mother said she'd take care of it right. She did take care of it using his credit card." When the Uber XL pulled into the driveway, Mom clapped her hands. "All right, let's move. TSA's been a nightmare lately. Luna, you're not coming, right?" I shook my head. "I'll stay. I promised Mr. Kinley I'd help with his cat this weekend." She rolled her eyes. "Suit yourself. You're always finding some excuse to miss out on family bonding." I didn't bother responding. It wasn't worth it. Becca walked past me dragging her massive pink suitcase and muttered, "Enjoy your weird little station." Tyler was last to leave. As he passed Grandpa, he slapped him on the shoulder. "Thanks again, Warren. We'll bring you back something from the resort gift shop." The door closed behind them. Silence filled the house like fog. I stood there with Grandpa for a moment. He looked at the door, then back at me. "They looked happy," he said softly. I hesitated. "They looked entitled." He smiled at that. "You didn't have to stay, Luna." "I didn't have to," I said. "But I wanted to." We made tea and sat out on the back porch. The air was still the kind of late summer warmth that settled into your skin. Birds chirped. A neighbor's lawnmower hummed in the distance. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt suspended like something was waiting to happen. "I'm glad you're here," Grandpa said after a while. "There's something I've been meaning to show you." I turned to him. His tone had shifted weightier. "I wasn't sure who would still care," he continued. "But maybe it's time someone did." That's when he stood up, placed his cup down gently, and nodded toward the back of the house. "Come on," he said. "It's in the basement." I didn't ask what it was. I just followed because sometimes silence says everything. And I knew whatever I was about to see wasn't just about this trip. It was about everything. The basement smelled like old paper and cedar wood. It wasn't creepy, more like a museum of forgotten things. Grandpa flipped on the pole chain light. Dust motes shimmered in the beam. "I haven't brought anyone down here in a long time," he said, easing himself onto a wooden stool. Most people stopped asking. I stood beside a row of battered filing cabinets. One drawer was slightly open, a yellow sticky note still clinging to the edge with fading handwriting. "Kitchen remodel 9. Go ahead," he said. "Start with the second cabinet from the left top drawer." Inside were folders neatly labeled, chronologically arranged. I pulled one out. Becca College Loans. Another Sabrina Home Equity Transfer. Each folder held photocopies of bank statements, checks, promissory notes, some signed, some not. The deeper I dug, the more I realized these weren't just dusty documents. They were proof of a pattern of a man who had been bled dry in the name of love and silence. "Grandpa," I whispered, "you've been keeping all of this." He nodded slowly, not to hold it over anyone, just to remember. I kept reading a $120 transfer to help Tyler pay off a business emergency. Another $5 to cover a last-minute cancellation fee for Belle's wedding venue. Because she changed her mind about the ocean view, some payments had notes. They promised to pay me back. Others were bare, cold numbers. I felt a pressure in my chest, the kind that builds not from surprise but from recognition. I had seen the same behaviors in my mother and Becca, in the way they treated Grandpa, like a resource, not a person. They told me not to worry about it, Grandpa said almost defensively, that I'd get it back, or that it was just money. They lied. I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't argue. He just looked tired. We spent the rest of the afternoon combing through files. With every folder, the past unfolded like an ugly quilt stitched together with guilt manipulation and transactional love. That evening, I cooked us grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Grandpa insisted on washing the dishes. As I wiped down the counter, I asked something I hadn't dared to before. Why did you keep giving even when they kept taking? He was quiet for a moment. Then he dried his hands and said, because I thought that's what love looked like until recently. I wasn't sure it could look like anything else. I stared at him. That sentence broke something in me and rebuilt something else, because I had grown up thinking love came with strings too. That if you weren't sacrificing, you weren't valuable. But sitting there watching him finally speak without apology, I realized something. This weekend wasn't about staying behind. It was about waking up. The next morning, I found Grandpa already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a pen in hand, scribbling in a lined notebook. The kettle whistled softly behind him. He poured us both tea without saying a word. You sleep okay? He asked. Yeah, I lied. In truth, I'd lain awake most of the night. The images from yesterday's folders still swimming in my head. The numbers, the signatures, the endless cycle of withdrawals from his life in the name of family. I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the worst of it yet. Do you mind if I go through more today? I asked. He looked up surprised. I thought you'd had enough. I think we both have. He nodded. Back in the basement, I aimed for the bottom drawer we hadn't opened yet. It groaned as I pulled it free, the metal scraping against old paint. Inside, there weren't folders, but a single black binder, thick and bound with an elastic strap. I opened it and everything changed. It wasn't bank records this time. It was legal documents, title deeds, contracts, power of attorney forms, and tucked into a plastic sleeve in the back, a single sheet labeled, Quit Claim Deed, Matthews Residence Sign, Transfer to Sabrina Matthews. The house Grandpa was living in had been signed away. I scanned the date, 3 years ago. Wait, is this? I asked aloud. But Grandpa was already behind me. He nodded solemnly. She told me it was temporary, that it was for legal protection in case of medical issues. Said Medicaid would come after the house if I didn't act. I blinked. But did you read this? I trusted her. I exhaled sharply. Grandpa, she owns this house now legally. You're just living in it. He didn't respond, just stared down at the document. And these others, I flipped to the earlier pages. Multiple property transfer sum to my mom, one to Becca, and even one to Tyler. All signed by Grandpa, all notarized, all done under the pretense of love. I felt nauseous. How did no one stop her? I asked. Didn't anyone tell you? She's my daughter, he said simply, and I didn't think she'd ever see me as disposable. That word cut deeper than any form. We went upstairs in silence. Later that evening, while Grandpa napped in the recliner, I stared out the kitchen window and made a decision. I couldn't undo the past, but I could stop pretending the present was acceptable. They'd taken everything from him but the air in his lungs, and they were counting on him being too proud or too polite fight back. But they didn't count on me, and they certainly didn't count on what I was going to do next. It was almost absurd how easy it was to find the paper trail. I knew what I was looking for. Grandpa kept everything. Tucked between old utility bills and expired insurance policies was a manila envelope marked House Refi 2001-20. Inside were scanned emails between my mother and a real estate lawyer. The wording was formal, but the intention was clear. We need to expedite transfer before his medical reevaluation. Before, not after. Before, as if they were racing against Tamino for his health but for the house. There was even a handwritten note from Becca. Mom said he won't fight it. Tyler can draw up the lease agreement to make it all look clean. Just get the papers in front of him when I take him to the DMV next week. They did it while he was renewing his license. They had him sign over his home in the same outing he thought was about his car registration. I sat there, the printed email trembling in my fingers, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just manipulation. This was premeditated, coordinated. They turned Grandpa's life into a checklist. His house, his savings, his legacy divvied up like it was clearance furniture. When I confronted him about the lease, he looked confused. "There's no lease," he said. "Sabrina said it didn't matter. I'd live here till the end." "And what if she decides that end is now?" I asked gently. He looked away. "She wouldn't do that," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. I pulled out my phone and showed him the email from Belle, the handwriting, the signature, the phrase, "He won't fight it." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "So this is what it's come to." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop. I started scanning every document, every note, every transfer. I organized them into folders labeled assets taken, unauthorized signings, coercion statements. Grandpa never read. I created a backup drive, printed hard copies, filed everything. Grandpa watched in silence. That night, as I handed him a cup of peppermint tea, he finally spoke. "I spent my whole life believing if I gave enough, they'd love me enough to protect me when I was old." I swallowed hard. And now I asked. He looked at me, tired but clear-eyed. "Now I know protection only comes when love is returned. And maybe I gave it in the wrong direction." That was the moment he stopped calling it a misunderstanding. That was the moment he stopped protecting them. And it was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about recovering what was stolen. It was about restoring what they tried to erase, his voice. The next morning, the air felt heavier, like something unspoken was hanging between us. Over breakfast, Grandpa barely touched his toast. I was reviewing scanned documents on my laptop when he suddenly stood up and said, "Come with me." We walked past the kitchen, past the basement door we already knew too well, and up the narrow attic stairs. The wooden steps creaked under our weight. At the top was a storage trunk I remembered from childhood, a heavy catered chest with rusted hinges and a stubborn lock. Grandpa pulled out a small key from the chain around his neck. "I've worn this for years," he said. "They all thought it was for the shed." He opened the chest slowly, his hand steady this time. Inside were photo albums, a small velvet box with my late grandma's brooch, and wrapped in plastic, a thick envelope labeled "Last Will and Testament." Warren H. Matthews, updated 2019. I stared at it. "I thought Mom said you had the will destroyed." He gave a soft laugh. "She told everyone I burned it after Grandma died. I let them believe that." Why, I asked. "Because they already treated me like I was fading. I wanted to see for myself. If it was love or just anticipation." He opened the envelope and handed me the contents. I skimmed the document, my eyes stopping on the keyline. "I, Warren H. Matthews, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my estate, financial accounts, and properties to my granddaughter, Luna Marie Matthews, who has cared for me with honesty and without expectation." My breath caught. "Me." He nodded. "I rewrote it after I watched them fight over Grandma's jewelry before the funeral was even over," he said. "But I wasn't ready to tell you until I was sure you hadn't inherited their hunger." I didn't know what to say. My chest felt full and hollow at once. "They'll contest it," I whispered. He smiled. "Let them try. I've kept records. I've kept everything." We sat together in that attic for a while, surrounded by memories and silence and dust. But it didn't feel sad. It felt like something was settling into place. That afternoon, I took the original copy and scanned it. Made 3 duplicates, stored them in separate locations. I emailed one to Grandpa's lawyer, the same man who had handled Grandma's estate. He replied within the hour. Received. "I'll schedule a notarization this week and Elle a good call." When I brought Grandpa his tea that evening, he looked more at peace than I'd seen him all weekend. "You sure about this?" I asked. He didn't even hesitate. "I'm not giving you a burden," he said. "I'm giving you the end of mine." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about property or inheritance. It was about truth. And finally, justice. They came back early. I knew the moment I heard the tires crunch on the gravel driveway 2 days ahead of schedule. I looked up from Grandpa's desk where I just finished organizing the notarized will and a stack of scanned evidence. He was sitting by the window watching without emotion. Mom stepped out first, dragging her designer suitcase behind her, tan lines sharp against her shoulders. Becca followed already, yelling into her phone about the nightmare hotel downgrade. Tyler, as usual, brought nothing but his smugness. The front door slammed open without a knock. "Dad!" Mom barked. "What the hell happened to the credit card Grandpa didn't move? Why is the account frozen?" She snapped again. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to have to pay out of pocket in front of the airline rep?" "Sit down," Grandpa said softly, motioning toward the kitchen table. She paused, thrown off by the firmness in his voice. "I'd rather stand," Belle muttered, arms crossed. I walked in with a manila folder and set it gently in front of them. "What's this?" Mom asked, narrowing her eyes. "Records," I said. "Transfers, documents you had him sign under false pretenses. And this," I tapped the top page, "is the updated will, the real one. You went through his things, belarked. That's elder abuse." "No," Grandpa said firmly, louder this time. "What you did was abuse." Silence. Tyler scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We've supported you for years." "Really?" I said, flipping a page. "Like the 120 wire to cover your crypto crash, or the 2 property transfers you orchestrated so Becca wouldn't have to pay taxes on her second home." Becca's mouth dropped open. "That wasn't just him trying to be generous," I continued. "You had him sign things without understanding what they meant. You exploited his trust. You don't know what you're talking about." Mom snapped, face flushed. "This is family. Families share. Families don't steal," Grandpa said. His voice was calm but sharp. "And they don't lie about plane tickets while using my credit card." Becca pushed her chair back. "You said I'd get the house. You said I wouldn't remember," Grandpa replied. "But I did. I remember everything now." Tyler leaned against the wall, arms folded. "So what? You're cutting us out because she stayed behind and made you feel special for a weekend?" "No," Grandpa said. "Because she respected me. Because she didn't treat me like a vault with a pulse." Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Now we were just trying to plan for the future. We didn't mean harm." "But you caused it anyway," I said. "You weaponized his love." There was a pause, a final pause. Then Grandpa reached into the folder and pulled out the notarized will. "You're no longer my power of attorney, Sabrina. That's been reassigned, and I've instructed my lawyer to initiate a formal investigation into the transfers you made." Mom's eyes widened. "You're making a mistake." "No," he said. "I made the mistake 3 years ago. I'm just correcting it now." Tyler stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Becca followed, red-faced and muttering threats about legal action. Mom stayed a moment longer. "After everything I did for you, you didn't do it for me," he said, standing tall. "You did it to me." She left. Silence returned, but this time it wasn't bitter. It was clean. I helped Grandpa back to his chair. His hands were steady now. "I didn't know I still had that in me," he said. "You never lost it," I said quietly. "You just forgot what it felt like to use it." That night, we lit a small fire in the backyard. Grandpa tossed a single page into the flame-saw copy of the fake will Mom had pushed him to sign. We watched it curl and vanish. And in that soft crackle, I realized we hadn't just defended his future. We'd reclaimed his past. By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. Mom sent a flurry of voicemails, her tone wobbling between threats and guilt trips. One message began with, "This is financial warfare, Warren," and ended with, "You'll regret letting her twist you like this." He didn't reply. Neither did I. Instead, we sat in the lawyer's office that afternoon. Mr. Conrad, Grandpa's longtime estate attorney, reviewed the documents I'd compiled. He was quiet at first, methodical, then he looked up, his eyes sharp. "This," he said, tapping the evidence folder, "is more than enough." The revocation of power of attorney was filed by noon. A freeze was placed on all joint family assets pending audit. The house deed was now under review for unlawful coercion, and a formal complaint was submitted regarding financial exploitation of a senior. They were not just losing access, they were losing control. That evening, as we walked back up the porch steps, Grandpa stopped halfway. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said, "when I'd be proud of how a mess turned out." I smiled. Sometimes messes are just truths rearranged. The days that followed were quiet but active. Becca posted a cryptic status about betrayal by blood. Tyler threatened legal action in a rage-filled email riddled with typos. We archived everything. And Mom, well, she switched tactics. A typed letter arrived by mail. No return address, but I recognized the font she always used. Neat, symmetrical, cold. Warren, we didn't mean for things to go this far. It was never about greed. Just planning for the future. We're still your family. We still love you. But this feels like punishment. Surely Luna doesn't want to be the reason our family breaks apart. He folded the letter without finishing it. She still thinks this is about her, he said. That night, something shifted. We had tea. We watched a documentary. And somewhere between the credits and brushing teeth, Grandpa told me something I hadn't expected. I've decided to move, he said. I blinked. Move where? Closer to you, he said simply. Well, find a small place, something sunny. I've had enough of this house and its ghosts. I nodded slowly, processing the weight of it. Not just moving homes, but shedding history. What about the furniture, the heirlooms, I asked. He sipped his tea. They took everything they thought mattered, but they never knew the only thing I needed was choice. I hugged him. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. In that moment, we were no longer the abandoned. We were the ones who had stayed and fought and changed the ending. 6 weeks later, we moved not to a sprawling estate or a luxury condo, but to a quiet 2-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It had a lemon tree in the backyard, a creaky front gate, and sunlight that poured through the kitchen like forgiveness. We didn't take much, just what mattered. Grandpa's records, Grandma's old brooch, a few photo albums, and the mug that said 1 Gramps in chipped navy paint. The rest we left behind like molted skin. We settled into a rhythm. I worked remotely part-time, and Grandpa joined a senior art class down the street. He painted lopsided lighthouses and never missed a session. I got used to hearing laughter in the house again, the kind that came without apology. Then one afternoon, I found an envelope taped to the fridge. Tina, for the things they never saw in you. Thank you for seeing me. Inside, a certified document naming me co-executive of his estate and a handwritten check for $15,000 with a sticky note attached for your grad school. Do it your way. I cried in the laundry room so he wouldn't see. That same week, Grandpa asked if I'd help him set up a small foundation. Something simple, he said. To help other seniors who've been cornered. We called it the Matthews Choice Fund. Within a month, we had legal paperwork, a modest website, and 2 inquiries from social workers wanting guidance for their clients. News spread faster than expected. A local journalist picked up the story. Grandfather and granddaughter reclaim legacy after financial exploitation. We didn't want fame, but we wanted people to know silence doesn't have to be permanent. And then came the card. No return address, just handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a child. You ruined everything. Mom. I read it twice. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I felt distance, like I had finally stepped far enough away that their words no longer echoed. I showed it to Grandpa. He read it, folded it, and slid it into the fireplace without a word. It curled and vanished in a quiet orange flame. I guess they still don't understand, I said. No, he replied, but that doesn't mean you stop building. The next morning, we planted lavender in the front yard. That weekend, we hosted a small gathering, 3 elderly neighbors, 2 volunteers from the foundation, and a girl who reminded me of myself. 5 years ago. She was caring for her grandfather full-time and felt like she was vanishing. You're not invisible, I told her, handing her a cup of tea. They just haven't learned how to see yet. As the sun dipped behind the lemon tree, Grandpa sat beside me, humming softly. They said if I couldn't afford it, he murmured, I should stay behind. I looked at him and smiled. Turns out, I said, staying behind was the best way to get ahead.